Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. I'm Jason Abrams, and this is the place where we lift the curtain on the world of real estate like never before. Every week, I sit down with visionaries, pirates, and mavericks. We're here to document, demonstrate, and most importantly, demystify their game-changing models and systems. What secrets propel them to the top? And how are they living their dreams? This is about passion, it's about strategy, but above all, it's about real, tangible success. So buckle up and let's dive in. This is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. You know him, you love him. Friends, he is my writing partner and an all-around incredible person. But here's the thing. He has sold, together with his partners, Dave Jenks and Gary Keller, over 6.5 million books. Titles that include The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, The One Thing, Shift, Hold, Flip, and My First Home. I am talking about none other than Jay Papasan. Today, he is going to tell us exactly how to use the principles of the one thing in our real estate businesses. Sit back and buckle up. This is Jay Papasan. Jay, how are you, sir?
Fantastic. So happy to be here.
It's an honor for us to have you. So many of the folks in our audience have read your books, and often we jump right to the models. Mm-hmm. But I actually want to take a step backwards, and I want to understand, especially with the one thing, what was the journey? Why did y'all decide to write that book?
So it actually came out of a training course. So this would have been 2007. I was running education then. We were writing a course. I mean, one of our weird names, 36-12-3. If that ring a bell for you?
It rings a bell.
It's like 36 transactions in 12 months with 3 hours a day. And the 3 hours a day was lead gen. And I'd done all the interviews. I'd submitted it to Gary. He had approved it. And he said, I want to spice this up a little bit. Can I write an intro over the weekend? And he wrote it, sent it to us on a Sunday. And the essay was called, it was like 14 pages, called The Power of One. And we sat down with our late partner, Dave Jenks, in his office. And I remember, Gary, I think this is a book. And he got excited. He goes, I thought the same thing. And that was actually the genesis, right? We were trying to write, how does a real estate agent launch their career and do it in such a way that they could hire their first employee? And you know what a big step that is.
Sure.
And what's the one thing they have to do? They have to lead generate 3 hours a day. That was the one thing. That was what that whole essay was about. Time block your one thing. Time block your one thing.
Gosh, it becomes so much more than that.
He kept making more and more time be committed to the one thing. And you know how relentless he can be around that.
When y'all write a book like The One Thing,
yeah,
it isn't just two guys sitting in a room expounding on what they think. The amount of research you did was staggering.
So all in all, like it was about 4.5 years of research. We had 2 full-time researchers at different times, a woman named Vicky, who was fantastic, and another lady named Kyla. And Gary's thesis, going all the way back to the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, is he's got strong opinions based on, now 4+ decades of experience. Dave Jenks had about as much experience when you looked at it back then, but they didn't want to do this is Dave's way or Gary's way, or once I joined them, Jay's way. We wanted to look at what do all the top performers do, and then look for the common thread. And that's like a thesis in my life, like a model for me. If you want to know how to do something incredible, go find 5-10 people who've already done it, interview them or read their books or whatever, and ask not what did they individually do, what are the things that all of them chose to do? And that often is the model. And so that's the approach we took, and we had 2 researchers helping us.
So because the book is so focused, and because the idea of the one thing is such an easy idea to latch onto, someone might be sitting there and saying, well, what did you actually research for 4 years? You could have figured that out in a weekend. Oh,
great question. Gary, his curiosity is boundless. So it showed up as a narrow book. When we submitted the manuscript in the summer of 2012, it was 440 pages. The actual book that is 240 pages.
So what was in the other pages?
Yeah, well, that's a mystery. But we read 4 or 5 books just on the nature of time. We went back through history and looked at how people time blocked and all of these like calendared. We did research with executives. How did they look at time? We did interviews with top performers. We studied top companies. We studied like even top musicians and athletes. So we were looking for the commonality like of extraordinary performance as an individual or as a business. And so we were very far ranging. But like when I submitted that to Ray Bard, our publisher, he very rightly said, guys, I love it. But when someone buys a book called The One Thing, they don't expect a doorstop. So use the principles of the book. And we did. And that was the 3 probably hardest months where we had to cut out a lot of the stories and case studies and some of the fluff. And it made the book better.
So how do you describe the overall premise, the mission of the book?
When I talk about our mission with what we do with the book is I want people to invest their time better. I think if you have clarity about where you're going and why it's important to you, a simple process, which I think we lay out in the book, to work backwards based on where I want to go and who I'm trying to become. What do I have to do today? Goal setting to the now. We can go into that later if you want. Now I have a way to make decisions in the now that actually align with my future, and I'm less likely to regret them, and they're more aligned with my values and purpose. And so like when I distill it down, like you could say it's a book about focus. I think it's a book about clarity and purpose. And when people are really clear about where they're going, and I don't think many people are, they make great decisions. When you know what you're actually saying yes to, it's really easy to say no. Like, let's take Jack. Yeah. You're going to go watch Jack play ball. You know it. It's on your calendar.
Yes.
Someone asks you to do something else. What do you say?
Not doing that.
Big. I know that's a big yes for you, right? You've made a commitment in advance. You've told your son, I'm going to be there rooting you on.
Yes.
You're not going to say no. You're going to say no to everything else around that.
His new thing is prescribing the rules by which I can cheer and when and at what octave level.
Okay.
He's very specific in how that works.
And you've got a distinctive voice from the sidelines.
He tells me that.
Yeah, he's going to call you out. Got it.
So people say all the time, I have more than just one thing, though.
Yes.
There's more steps than one. I have more things to do than one. How do you address that?
Well, that's the metaphor of the domino run. So what's funny is when The One Thing was up there at that book expo, just think about like some New York book buyer, just like pshaw. Like, what do you mean? There's never one thing. You know, they were just laughing at it. That's one of the reasons they dismissed it. Just like the idea of one thing was so ridiculous to them. And it's true. Like, I don't have just one thing. You know, I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great partner. I've got all of these hats I wear. I've got to be a great son. I want to be a great brother. I want to be a great uncle. Like, these are all important roles. But when am I wearing the hat? And do I know what I should be doing when I'm wearing that hat? So at any given moment, you do have one thing. And it is, are we being inappropriate in the moments of our lives? And so do we have a mechanism for that? So the domino is like about, if I can focus on that right thing, that first thing, the first domino, a lot of times, a lot of other dominoes take care of themselves.
It's a big idea.
Right? When you line up the dominoes and knock over the first one, what happens? If you've done your job, they all fall down.
So in our industry, let's switch gears and get real specific. I'm a real estate agent. I'm out driving in my Tesla right now at 110 miles an hour, and I'm wearing my seatbelt, and I'm thinking about how do I take this principle and put it into place in my business tomorrow morning. And by the way, if you're driving in the Tesla, don't worry about taking notes. I'm taking the notes. If you want them, they come out every Thursday. You can sign up for them at MREAnotes.com, and you'll get all the notes from this episode. How do I put this exactly into effect in my life?
All right, let's go back to the beginning. Like, this all came out of lead generation. We're writing a course about lead generation and time blocking it. When people make a regular commitment to look, prospect, and market for new business, that is the one thing that drives a great service sales business, whether it's real estate or any other, honestly. And so when we wrote this book, I remember Gary saying, you know, MREA is the 20% of success for a real estate agent, or honestly, a sales service business. MREI is the 20% of building wealth through real estate. It's the core things. One thing provides an approach to doing it, right? The one thing is really about, how do I know what my one thing is at any given moment? And how do I make sure it gets done? And like the research, like the simple act of calendaring your work, right? I need to do this thing. I'm going to lead generate. I'm going to talk to 20 people in my sphere tomorrow. How long is that going to take? I'm going to give it 2 hours. Great. I'm going to block 2 hours. The very act of me putting that on my calendar with the intention of like, I'm going to do activity versus meet with someone, my odds of doing it went up 3 times.
Really?
3 times.
That's
when
a
people
huge
just
number.
say they're going to do something, it goes about 35 to 38%. When they navigate their time and they have to think, well, I know I want to do it, but when am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? That's all the stuff that goes in your calendar. It goes up to more than 90% likely that they'll do it.
That's staggering difference.
That's the surprisingly simple part, right? You've got a meeting and you got your phone on your desk. What happens 15 minutes before your next Zoom?
It pings me and says, hey, you got something coming up.
Yeah. It is trying to prepare you to transition. So our world is actually very well set up for this, right? If you have a commitment on your schedule and you're committed to living your schedule, our electronic schedules will help us live it.
It almost feels like then I'm faced with a different problem, which is what do I put on my schedule? So how do you analyze and exactly figure out what the one thing is in any of the categories?
All right, so you're referring to, I think it's page 114 or something like that. It's the 7 circles. So we talk about where would you apply the book. You'd apply it for your spiritual life, your health, your personal life, your job, your business, your money, and your personal relationships. I think you just have to ask the question. My answer is not going to be your answer. I can tell you the answer for every real estate agent listening.
Yeah, let's make it specific to I'm running my real estate business. What's the one thing in that business?
If I'm running a real estate business, my one thing is lead gen. Like you see it again and again. I don't care how good your service plan is. I don't care how great you are working with people. If you don't have customers to serve, nobody's going to know. And the biggest trap we see is people who go get that customer or one or two of them. They over-index on servicing them. They stop lead generating for the future. They look up at a closing and they have no business in the pipeline. The ones I love to watch and study, it's not just the 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day. Like you see it, like last night, Wendy was trying to land a listing while we were in the middle of our dinner.
That's so good.
They know that's the thing that allows them all of their success. Because what happens when you have more business than you can do yourself?
Then you can start bringing in people to leverage and do that business.
Now you go from being self-employed to owning a business, right? That all of your income is not dependent on you personally going out and hunting and killing it and cleaning it and putting it on the table, like to use that metaphor. I don't know where that came from.
It's good.
There we go. But like now I have other people working in the business. You go from I do it to we do it and hopefully to they do it, which is, for me, that's business ownership.
So this show is listened to by so many mega agents. They're waking up and they're running teams and they're running other businesses. How do you use this premise to get more out of your real estate team? Because it's one thing to wake up and figure out what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. How do you take it and make sure that other people are doing their one thing also?
Well, we use a thing called the 411. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Wendy does our team, the Papasan Properties Group, like every morning they have a stand-up and everybody has to declare what their one thing for the day is. So I think whether it's a one-on-one or a team setting, the people who report to you, who work for you, at least on a weekly basis, should have to declare their number one priority for the week and the day to you. One, that allows you to always know, it's like, well, why the heck is Sean focused on that? Why is Anna focused on that? It allows you to at least go in and get curious if you feel like they're off kind of in the bushes instead of really paying attention to what they should be doing.
Sure.
But if they're in sales, like their one thing for the week should be to go get business and follow up on leads. And yes, sometimes they'll be showing homes and they'll be writing contracts, but you should see that in their calendars. So the 411 is basically one page where you have your annual goals, your monthly goals, and your weekly goals. And you break it down and we meet for like 15 or 20 minutes and ask like, what are your priorities for the week? And they should be aligned with your monthly and your annual goals.
This sort of forces a conversation about goal setting to the now. Because
Yes.
if I don't know what I want in 5 years, then how do I decide what to do today? So what is goal setting to the now?
So it's going out in the future and then working backwards. And once you are aware of this principle, backwards planning, it's everywhere. They use it in the military, right? They say, oh, if we want to take that hill, let's imagine we've already taken it. What were the steps that we followed? It's weird when you work backwards from a destination. So I'll give you a metaphor. If I say, today, Jason, you're sitting in this chair. You're the host of the MREA podcast, our premier brand. You earned the right to sit in that chair, which was a big honor for Gary to give you that chair. I love it. what would be the 4 or 5 milestones on your journey that you felt like got you there? Now, you're going to go back in your memory bank, right? Like, I don't know how far back you just went. We don't need to play that out.
I'm in elementary school, and I was gifted then, Jay.
There you go. Like, sometimes people say, well, I had a teacher who believed in me, and then I had a mentor, I had a first boss. Like, when we look backwards, we naturally see the milestones. When we look forwards and say, what are all the things I could do today that might help me be a top podcaster? It's a 360 view of infinite possibilities. So by imagining ourselves in a successful future, which, by the way, forces us to define what success looks like, which is not something a lot of people give a thought to, now we can work backwards from it. So we go out someday I'm the number one realtor in my market. I'm the number one realtor in the country. I'm the whatever it is. Now, based on that, what would you have to achieve in 5 years? What's the one thing that you would say, man, if I did that in 5 years, I'm on track for this other thing? And then you take your 5-year goal, we're going to work backwards and say, based on my 5-year goal, in 5 years, if I was selling 100 million on my team, I would be on track to be number one in my market. Well, what would you have to do in 1 year to be on track for that 5-year goal? Now people are like, well, that's simple math. Like, if I was doing 20 million, right, I could ramp it up. It's like, great, you did 20 million at the end of this year. Well, based on the goal of 20 million, what do you have to do this month? And someone say, well, I need to take 20 listings this month. I'm just making this up. I don't know the price point. But then based on your monthly goal, what do I have to do this week? Well, I have to set this many appointments. Well, based on that weekly goal, what do I have to do today? Well, I need to start calling my pipeline to get those listings. Like, you work backwards as in a straight line. And people don't think that all of the other stuff happens. It all happens along the way. You focus on those milestones and all the other stuff takes care of itself.
Yeah, and of course. And if you're going to make phone calls, do it in a TCPA friendly and compliant way.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this, because the way you just described it to me feels so organic. I look where I want to go way out in the future, and then I work my way back to what I need to do today, almost to the extent where I can't think of another way that someone would set a goal. But this was kind of groundbreaking when you all started talking about it.
Well, like I said, once we started looking, it was out there, but nobody's teaching us this in college or high school. No one learns this at their dinner table. Maybe now they do, I hope. But it is this idea of working backwards from where you want to go. And I do think, like, we had to define the word success, right? This book is about extraordinary results, but like, okay, so what does that mean? We ended up defining success as getting what you want. Like, we looked at monetary, we looked at all these things, like, but it's always individual. And the question is, do you know what you want? So I think the reason a lot of people don't do this is that they're afraid to look too far in the future. They're not quite sure what they want. It requires them to be a little still and think. But when you know ultimately kind of where you want to go with your life, like, I want to have this in my marriage, I want to have this in my health, I want to have this in my business, you just start throwing out some dream outcomes. Now you can work backwards. And I usually, when we're coaching and training, is say, like, why is it important to you that that happen? What will happen if you fail? And just like you had a good listing appointment, you're looking for your motivation, you kind of tap into those things. Now I've got a vision that failure to achieve it has some cost to me. And working backwards, now I'm finding my own motivation. There's just so many things that line up to make this work.
When you and Gary coach me, you often say, keep your focus, maintain your focus. Dare I say, you could be nauseated by the amount of time we spend talking about focus.
Yeah.
But y'all wrote a book on focus. Why do you think it's so easy for our most successful people to lose focus? Because I get phone calls all the time from mega agents who say, I'm doing 150 million in sales, and now I've got this quote unquote new opportunity. And I always say, well, take out the word opportunity and put in the word job. Mm-hmm. And they say, no, it's not that. And I say, well, does it take any of your time? And they say, sure. And I say, great, use the word job then. And they get mad at me instinctively really quickly. Why do you think successful people tend to let their focus wander?
Well, I bet there's a lot of like top agents listening to this podcast, and they've probably gotten to a place where working with buyers and sellers doesn't require a lot of them anymore, right? I mean, it can always be challenging, but it's not requiring them to like go through whole new states of creativity and personal growth. I think that when you a lot of the top people, they get to a place in mastery around doing the basics that kind of leaves them a little bit bored, right? So they're chasing kind of something new that gets them excited, which is why they want to write a book or become a speaker or become a coach, you name it. They often are trying to take that knowledge and move it into a different arena that will challenge them and bring some more creativity to it. And that's probably why Gary is constantly on us. It's like, make peace with the boredom of success.
Make peace with the process.
Yeah. And in any arena, not just the one they're in, if they became a speaker, if they became an author, there is something that lines up most with that success in that arena that ultimately becomes boring. Do you think Olympic athletes get excited every time they get in the pool to swim?
No.
No, it's a chore.
And
but that's how you become an athlete that goes to the Olympics, is you do those boring things on a regular basis that add up that most people won't do.
I think that's spot on. I also think it's so interesting because Gary would look up and say, that's incredible that you're doing 150 million. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Let's get to 400 million. Let's get to 500 million. I hear him say that all the time. Why are we talking about something else? Why don't we just sell more than anyone ever has?
That's his wonderful dysfunction. He always sees more potential in everyone around him than they see in themselves. And it's also a gift. I don't know about you. I've been here for 24 years, and people say, what's the biggest gift of working with Gary? Wendy would tell you this independently of me. Every time we thought we were thinking big for our lives, Gary would point out that we could be thinking bigger.
Wow.
And it's kind of relentless. It's like, would you just shut up, man? I mean, can I enjoy the ride for a minute? But he is so committed to personal growth. I mean, that's his mission in life, is to kind of optimize his existence here. Like, how can I become the best I can be?
Maximize his potential.
Yeah. And that's an endless pursuit. There is no finish line. So ultimately, he can be pleased with where he is, but he'll never ultimately be satisfied. And those of us who work in his environment feel that.
Yes.
Those who mastermind with him, who come to work with us, they feel that because he's always going, I love that. And you have more potential than you believe.
Yeah, that's 100% right. The one thing, the methods within it, the methodology is used in companies all over the world.
Yeah.
You might not realize, if you only know Jay from the work that he's done in the real estate industry, there's giant companies running on this. What are some of the neatest stories that you've heard about companies that have put this into action?
So we've hit almost every industry now. We've worked with Fortune 50 companies all around the world, multiple continents at this point. We've worked with special forces in almost every branch of the military, right? People doing extraordinary things. I think most people come at it as a way to get clarity around what their focus should be, right? We have simple tools and simple processes for getting people to narrow down their focus, to walk through our process, to bring meaning to their work. We also have great tools for just maintaining that focus. Well, how do I say no, right? How do I say no to a teammate? How do I say no to my kids? So they come to us for what I would say is like, it feels like very foundational, basic stuff. But if you're working in a giant company, it's very unclear to most people how their role actually lines up to the success. We worked with a group at a biomedical company that I don't have the right to name. It was just outside of San Francisco. And you're walking into this company, they've got like 20,000 worldwide employees, and we're working with their sales teams. And we had one team using the principles of the book that went from in the bottom quartile of all of their salespeople, and in one quarter, they moved into the top 3 overall.
Get out.
And
in one quarter?
In one quarter, they took their mid-year, right? They were still failing. They looked up and they said, we've got to finish strong. And they used the book and they said, what's going to be not just the one thing we're going to focus on of all these medical products, we're going to focus on one product. And they also decided to focus on one customer. And they went all in. And it was because of their success that they brought me in, I think, our team like 11 different times. So like this idea, and it's so counterintuitive. If you want to go really big, you have to act small. It is so counterintuitive. When people say, I want to be number one, they're like, well, how many products can we sell? How many customers can we talk to? Versus asking a bigger question is like, how focused could we be and still get that achievement? And just be relentless on that thing. Special forces have brought us in. We do goal setting retreats. We did one for a group out of North Carolina, another one out of, like, these people are being deployed all around the world on a moment's notice to do stuff that we can't even imagine.
Yes.
And how is it that they stay on the same page with their spouses? So a lot of our success in the office can actually contingent on us being healthy and happy at home. Like, you know this as someone who works with a lot of people. If someone has a lot of dysfunction in their health or their home, that tends to walk into the office with them. They're not their complete self. And so you think about the bajillions of dollars the military pours into training these people. They don't want them to be carrying that into the battlefield. So we do help people get on the same page, not just with their coworkers and their bosses and their goals, but also with their families.
So I'm in my mind, I'm putting together everything that you're saying to me. Mm-hmm. And if I get this wrong, tell me. But it sounds like step one is figuring out which parts of my life matter and that I want to have success in.
I think you're on step two.
Okay.
It's not a quiz, but that based on what we've talked about, I think it goes out first is, do I have a vision for my life? Right? So we usually say, let's cast a vision. Then we're going to make a plan. Then we're going to prioritize. Then we're going to take action. And then we're going to evaluate. It's 5 steps in our one thing approach. You cast a vision. Where am I going? Why is that important? What are my values? What is my purpose? And that's the kind of messy work a lot of people don't want to do. I don't know why. It's easier for me to go out, set a new set of goalposts up every single year and go run through them. But the problem is, I think a lot of people look up in midlife and they go, man, I've been running in circles. I am running through the goalposts, but I'm not actually going anywhere that's fulfilling for me, which is why they end up at our doorstep.
That's so pointed, by the way. I had the Empire Builders, which is my big sister podcast, and they're great. And Tiffany Fikes said the other day, she said, I looked up, I was having wild success, and I had built a life I never wanted to live.
Yeah.
And that's hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. A lot of people are very outwardly successful and inwardly miserable because they're actually not living their own life. I mean, you've heard Gary ask the question, whose life are you living? And then can you prove it? And I think a lot of people get up and they're chasing achievement. They're chasing success because of what the world will think of them or what they might, like, I'll be happy when, but they haven't done the hard work of knowing what will actually make them happy. And it's out there, but it's just a process.
Okay, so step one, cast the vision.
Right. And then you make a plan, right? That would be goal setting to the now, right? So based on where I ultimately want to go, what are the milestones that I have to hit to feel like I'm really on track?
Okay, then
when
what?
you look up and you've got like my goal for this year, my milestone, and I got to prioritize. How am I going to do that? And prioritization happens all the time. What's my one thing? What's my one thing this week? What's my one thing this month? Right? Then I'm going to take action. So what's funny is, like, whenever people time block, like, I want to reduce my stress. Great. What are you going to time block? Well, I'm going to reduce my stress. It's like, no, it's got to be an activity, right? I've got to take action. What is the action you're going to take? You're going to meditate. You're going to work out. You're going to get to bed on time. We can time block an activity and go do it. So if you were working with one of our coaches or one of our MAPS coaches, they'd be like, great, Jason, you want to have this outcome at the end of the week. What activity are you going to do that you believe will drive that outcome? And the last step is you evaluate. How do we do? What will we make different this week? Like, we bill it as simple in order to get extraordinary. And we really did try to keep it simple because people, they love complicated things. Like, I think a lot of our people use EOS. I get it. Man, I look at that and it hurts my head.
Me too.
How many steps are in a meeting again? And how am I going to remember them? And like, I don't want to have that much process driving everything in my life.
And by the way, we love Gino. If you go back and
him.
listen to his episode on our show, because he gets into all of this, but you've created a very simple, scalable way to think and take action.
Gary and I did with Dave back in the beginning. But yes, I'm going to put a we. Thank you for saying the you, but I'm going to say we. And yes, because a simple plan of action makes you nimble. Like, we have a one-page business plan, just like the GPS. How do you get everybody on the same page? Well, have your plan on one page. Make it simple enough. Like, when people have these 30-page business plans, go get a loan from the bank on that. That'll work. But like, I can't organize my team to take action because nobody knows which part's theirs.
It's spot on. All right, we're going to switch gears. Jay,
okay.
There's a real estate story. I know you're familiar because you listen to the show, but in ancient Athens, there was a philosopher named Epicurus, and he bought a villa in downtown, bustling city, and it's awesome, but he looked for quiet space, so he built a garden. And instead of going and holding court in giant venues, he invited friends over to sit in his garden and talk about life. We'd like to invite you to our garden. Will you join us?
Yes.
So here's my question for you. You and Wendy have helped thousands of couples in
Yes.
your couples retreats and goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
What are the one or two things that you've learned that everyone out there that's in a relationship that wants to be closer with their chosen, what would you tell them?
I think one of the most impactful things happened last year. Maybe it was the year before last. There were a few couples at our goal setting retreat that were clearly in trouble. And when you ask people to go out in the future and imagine their future, an extraordinary future, I think a lot of people were worried that they were going to look out in the future and their spouse wasn't in the picture. So what does it mean if it looks like we're heading in opposite directions? And so kind of an impromptu, and I can't, draw this, but I drew two lines that started out parallel and then they started, kind of EKG, like they get far apart, they come back together. And I said, the reality is any relationship in your life, you're going to come in and out of sync with people. There are going to be times where what you want to do is naturally what they want to do. Where you want to go is where they want to go. And there's times where that's going to be the opposite. And I believe the key to a healthy, long relationship is constantly staying in touch with where each person needs to be going and why. Because if I know that, like, you're my partner, we're business partners, that you need to go off and do this thing this year, and I understand why, and we actually are committed to being partners, then I'm going to be like, all right, business partner, you do that, and I'm going to cover for you. And we make an exchange, because it's not always 50-50. It's not always equal.
That's a big idea.
But then the next year it might flip. And I'd be like, dude, man, I've got to step back from these panels. Can you step up? Is that a win for you? And we work it out. But if you don't communicate, you're just aware of being apart. If you do communicate, we can then have an opportunity to lean in and keep the connection going. Even if the line's getting pretty thin, you can keep the connection going.
That's a big idea.
It is a big idea. And I do think a lot of people found relief in going, it's okay. We're not expected as human beings to be, or business partners, right, in every realm, to be in lockstep in the same direction. We're going to disagree. We're going to have to go explore things, but then we have an opportunity to communicate and come back.
How many books do you read on a monthly basis or an annual basis?
So I set a goal, started this in 2012, set a goal of 50 books a year. And so I don't ever hit it. Wendy always gets on to me in December. It's like, why don't you read a bunch of short books? Right?
And she just wants to hit the goal.
Yeah.
It's
and
so
I get
good.
that. But it's more about the journey. Like what I want to do is have an incentive to keep reading books because books make me a better writer. And so I try to read 25 fiction, 25 nonfiction. The nonfiction is almost always, there's a few real estate books, there's a few business books, there's a few health books, and then there's whatever's the top of the charts. But I usually end up, I think I've averaged 47.
For our audience members that tend to only read nonfiction because they're just why do you read fiction?
I think that when you read stories, I mean, that's how we used to learn. Everything was an oral tradition and it was in the form of a story. I think you learn about life and people. And it also, I think, gives people a healthy way to unplug. And I'll tell you, I've converted a lot of our top realtors into fiction readers. And you see Gary and I doing this. I would like to claim him. I don't know that he had read a fiction book since high school when I met him. Maybe like the Da Vinci Code or something, like one book a year.
He reads a ton of fiction.
Yeah. When you read about someone running and you're imagining them running, the parts of your brain that involve running light up like you're actually running. So when you watch TV and you watch someone running, the only thing that's actually engaged is your eyes. Your brain actually shuts down. There's things that we do that are healthier than others. And I'm not saying I like TV, but like with books, if your kids say, hey, Dad, I'm going to read another book, you're never going to say, oh, you're reading too much. Like we know intuitively this is a healthy behavior, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So I just say, go out there and read.
You launched the One Thing podcast in what year?
It was January 26, 2017.
Why'd you launch it?
What I found is it's a place where people engage. People would read the book and they would want to continue the conversation. And a weekly conversation via podcast was a way for them to stay focused and involved with trying to live a different way.
And you're relaunching.
This is a good business story. Our podcast was not growing anymore. Even with Nikki's talents, it just wasn't growing. And it's like, you can say, but wow, we've got 6 million downloads and we've got this history. But my friend Nathan Barry says, like every year there's this thing called qualityflation, that the quality of everything around you goes up. We started 8 years ago, and there wasn't as much competition. Like, there wasn't as much refinement. People didn't have podcast producers hanging out with them to make the process better. They looked up and like it gets more and more competitive. And if you're not changing how you're approaching your work, whether it be a podcast, a book writing, or real estate sales, you're going to fall behind. So I opened up my calendar. I met with 50 customers and asked them, what does the one thing do for you? What do you need it to do for you? What did you love about the podcast? What do you not love? And I just listened to their answers, and their answers weren't what I thought they were going to say.
Gosh, what'd you learn?
I learned that they wanted to have less engagement with other authors and famous people and more deep dives into the ideas of the book, right? They want to live the book.
Was it bittersweet because then you look up and you got a new job again?
Yeah, but I embrace it. I'm still passionate about it to this day. And so stepping in, I think it's the right time, and I'm super excited to share. I mean, I've got now 15 years. I mean, I was living this book before it came out.
What can we expect? I'm tuning in, by the way.
You're going to get shorter episodes. They're going to be more hard-hitting. We're going to go right to the point. And I know that you've been coached towards this as well. It's like you need to start with the finish. These are busy people we're talking to. What am I going to learn today? Why is it important to me? And let's get to the point.
I'm all in. And that comes out every Monday. Is that right?
We drop on Mondays.
Jay, I believe that you are one of the philosophers of our time. And I say that because the books that you and Gary choose to write are often weightier than anything else written on the subject. And you say timeless, I say weighty. We're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I believe that y'all are changing a ton of lives, and I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I want to make an impact. That's what I ultimately want to achieve with my life, is to make an impact.
You are, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good. He's so good. When you sit back and you listen to his words, you are immediately taken with the clarity that he has on how to use the principle of the one thing in his life and in his business. Here's the truth of it. The idea of the one thing, when you read the book, it's so clear. What's the one thing I can do next such that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary or however you want to say it? And we read the book and have the thoughts and you say, okay, that makes sense. But it's the person who then puts that into action in their life and business that gets all the benefit. Listen to what he says on page 110. It's realizing that extraordinary results are directly determined by how narrow you can make your focus. And Gary Keller says it all the time. If you hold a magnifying glass up and you move it around, you ever do that as a kid? You're holding it up and you're trying to burn leaves. You don't move it around and spread the focus. You hold it as still as you can in one place. And if you do that for a long enough period of time, you will start a fire. That's what Jay is saying. And here's the last thing I want to leave you with. Friends, the one thing isn't just a principle you use in business. The one thing is a way to tackle all of the opportunities of life. You see, most people wake up in the morning and they think that the task list is created equally, that everything they could do are the right things to do. Gary and Jay see it differently. They say that the time spent determining what the one thing is you should do first that knocks over all the other dominoes is probably the best time you will spend. In the end, it isn't about how much you do. It's about how much time you spend doing the one thing that matters most. Go forth and do likewise. There it is. That wraps another episode. Friends, I don't know what you're taking out of this. I really don't. I'll tell you what I want you to be taking out of it, which is these are the people that are having tremendously big lives. And the reason it's happening is because they're setting up the models and systems to do just that. Gary Keller told me that leadership is teaching people how to think so that they do the things they need to do when they need to do them, so that ultimately they get the things they want when they want to have them. And that's what I want for you. You're all leaders, but it begins with leading ourselves. If you're enjoying this podcast, I want you to click the subscribe button anywhere that you get your podcasts. We want to be the voice in your head every single week. And every week we're dropping new content. We also send out a newsletter at the conclusion of every show to make sure that you get the highest points and the models and systems that were discussed. So if you want to sign up, I need your name and your email address. Head over to the millionaireagentpodcast.com. millionaireagentpodcast.com. Enter your name and your email address, and every week that newsletter will be in your box. Friends, you just went on a journey. I hope that what happens between now and the next time we meet is absolutely wonderful for you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning: you must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an autodialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.